Welcome to Uncivil Law. I hope you're having a great day as always. And I am your uncivilian leader, Uncivil Law itself. So, Nate Brody will be joining me in just a minute. I just sent him the link because I forgot whose turn it was to host. Yeah, Nate and I take turns on hosting. And so I was waiting for him to send me the link. And I texted him like 5 seconds ago, be like, where's the link for tonight? He's like, you're the one hosting. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, fair enough. So, what will we be talking about tonight? Well, we will be talking about drama with my chair. I ordered a new chair. We will be talking about that. And if Nate doesn't show up, then I'll talk about it for a while. Nate is about to join me. I see Nate there. I do not see the camera for Nate, though. Nate, you have to turn on your camera. Nate, let's let Nate the lawyer join in. We are live, Nate. Anytime you want to start commenting, that'll be fine. I'm going to remove him from the stream just for a second while he's actually joining. He has to turn on the camera, but he'll be here in a second. Anyway, so we're here going to talk about my chair issues and chair drama. Chair Chan is having some issues, so we'll talk about chair drama. We are going to talk about the vice presidential pick, our respective thoughts. We are going to talk about a new thing that just came down from Department of Education dealing with Yale and whether Yale is being discriminatory on the basis of race and trying to get some sort of thing from them, which is always super hilarious. And we're also going to be dealing with the fact that the DA in charge of that cop shooting at the Wendy's in Georgia, that DA has been under investigation for corruption for a little bit themselves, and they just lost their job. Not technically speaking, because their term hasn't expired, but effectively, they just had a election there, a primary, and they are out. They lost the primary, so short of a miracle happening, that DA is gone. And that we will be talking about that trauma, and then anything else Nate wants to talk about. Nate can't decide whether or not he wants to turn his camera on. He keeps coming on and keeps coming off. So he's working on it. So let's talk a little bit about my chair woes. I ordered a new chair, which, by the way, is very, very nice. For those of you wondering, it's AK Racing. It's their Onyx, Onyx, I think is how you pronounce that. And long story short, the pneumatic tube they sent me with is too short. So I ordered a new one from Amazon that was longer, but the one I got from Amazon was too long. And the pneumatic tube that it came with, for some reason, is designed not to work anymore. So I've ordered yet a different one, a third one. And new pneumatic tubes are only $20. They're pretty cheap. But it is not here, so I'm back in my IKEA chair. And I don't have the comfort that is the memory foam steel reinforced chair. It's very sad. Let's let Nate and his lamp join the stream now. Hello, Nate and his lamp. How are you doing?
Yo, what's going on? I'm doing okay. How you been doing? I see the 10,000 sub celebration.
10,000 subs, yes. 10,000 subs. We hit 10,000 subscribers last night, and we did our special stream this morning, which I didn't know, but apparently YouTube doesn't really like it when you do those instant, what's it called, with the delay, where it's like it loads it up in advance and then it does the countdown
Schedule?
thing. Premiere.
Oh, the Premiere.
Yeah, so it doesn't like Premiere. No, well, it was very, very low ranked video. It was very poorly performing video. And it made me a little bit sad because it was did you watch it?
Yeah, it was about the common law. I saw it.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. It's like, let me explain how law works in the easiest way possible by going over this article, which basically explains here is how law works.
Was it demonetized?
No, it wasn't demonetized. In fact, I had chosen not to monetize it initially at all, and then I chose to monetize it, but I removed all the mid rolls because I didn't want to be interrupting on the stream. But whatever. So yes, we hit 10,000 subscribers, and Nate, you're not too far behind me on that, are you? You're like 7,000 or 8,000.
I'm about 8,000. So hopefully I can get that extra 2 to put me over the hump.
You're coming down. You're going to be right there too, man. So that's awesome, man.
Yeah, after my mea culpa yesterday but it's okay though. It's okay.
Well,
you guys forgive me.
No, it's great because you'll say if you're wrong, I'll say if I'm wrong. And it's just nice it's refreshing when people say, you know what, I was wrong. I made a mistake about this, or I was talking with you in Viva, one time I was like, I've changed my mind basically in the middle of discussion because you guys are making persuasive points. So, It's like being intellectually honest enough to be like, yeah, that makes more sense.
You know what? I never understand why, and maybe it's just today, in today's times, but I never understand why if we're human beings. We make mistakes, right? It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to be wrong. You just have to own up to it and say, okay, I made a mistake, and now it's okay. You know, it's if someone was saying, like when I was saying I was gonna I had changed my mind on the Flynn thing. Someone was saying, oh, now people are gonna say anytime you're mistaken, oh, it's just like Flynn. But I said, you know what? If someone looks at my stream and can't understand that, if someone presents to me new information that I feel is compelling, that I can't change my mind, then what am I doing? You know what I'm saying? I'm not giving honest opinions. I'm doing illegal evil. But I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there.
Yeah, I mean, you're ultimately doing yourself a disservice because you're not becoming smarter. You have the opportunity to correct a mistake in your thinking and become smarter, and you're ultimately doing a disservice to yourself.
Yeah.
So I've said this before, and I like it very much. It's like one of the points of freedom of speech is specifically for me to be able to expose my own ignorance, on the hope that someone else will have an opportunity to say, you made a mistake in this point here, or you made a mistake in this line of reasoning, and then I can listen to it and be like, maybe I did. In fact, along those lines, very recently I did a sort of a monologuing stream where I was discussing my thoughts on the death penalty, because I have a very sort of strange position. It seems to be a somewhat unique position on the death penalty and ethics of the death penalty. For me, I think the ethical case for the death penalty is not sufficiently different from the ethical case for life imprisonment. To me, it just feels like life imprisonment is the death penalty, but with extra steps. It feels, and it also, I also tried to make the case that the death penalty is actually a morally inferior position, because in both cases you've made this ultimate decision: this person deserves to die. You're going to lock them away till they die, but you don't even have the courage of your own convictions to actually take the step yourself. You're like farming it out to nature. So rather than
the finality argument.
Well, the premise of them is equal in the respect of, we're assuming that some people, if you assume some people who are innocent get executed, I think you have to assume some people who are innocent die from causes as a result of their life imprisonment sentence.
Yes.
So if your starting premise is the death penalty can never be perfect, and therefore we will execute people that are innocent, I'm like, okay, premise granted. But if the system can never be perfect, that means definitionally, then we will send people to die in prison, which is what life imprisonment without parole is. We're sentencing people to die in prison who will also be actually innocent. So the moral implication of executing an innocent person, and the moral implication of just waiting for nature to do it for you by locking them in a box until it happens, doesn't seem to be sufficiently distinct. If the morality of someone being innocent concerns you in the one case, it doesn't feel like it should be less concerning in the other. And so that was my sort of moral position on that.
I'm thinking about it because I do understand it, but it's like the case that I just that I did the video on about the guy who got life imprisonment for the hedge clipper thing, right? Let's say it was murder and he was falsely convicted. The fact that he could still appeal, the fact that he could still fight, the fact that he's still in the game. When it's like it's death, the finality of death.
Yeah.
And then coming back and saying, oh, he was actually innocent, versus that still having that time to fight. I think there's a moral difference in the sense of being able to correct an error versus never being able to correct the error. And I think that's where they're not equal in the sense.
But then if we're going to consider which gives you the greater probability to correct the error, it's not immediately obvious which gives you better opportunity to correct the error, because the death penalty takes a lot of time until it actually is executed, and death penalty cases are reviewed at a higher level of review, like at every step of the process.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And not for the least a reason that there's so many people that are opposed to the death penalty. There's all the amici and all the people who are investigating after the fact, and innocence projects and so forth and so on. So I was like, okay, if you want to if I say this, if it were me and I were actually innocent, which gives me the better probability? And also, I would just assume that the jury probably takes it more seriously when they're making the decision to convict because they're aware of the implication. I'd imagine that although the legal standard is the same, the jury takes it a little bit more serious when death is on the line. So that my probability of getting not convicted is a little bit better too. So it's like if it were me and I were actually innocent, is my probability better of that being revealed if I was being subject to the death penalty versus not?
Well,
If I were in Texas versus a state that doesn't have death penalty, where am I better off in having that process done?
well, there's two things. The first thing is that there's a procedural issue. I'm a procedural guy. The procedural issue is that the conviction, the death penalty conviction versus the death penalty sentence are two different processes. So the jury can convict you of the murder, right? But then you have the separate process of
which again, that very fact is also a separate step that makes the death penalty like, oh, maybe my odds are better because maybe now the jury has to make two decisions instead of just one, and the judge still has the decision they make. So maybe I'm better off in the death penalty case.
Because in your first premise, you were saying that for the death penalty case, the jury is thinking during the guilt phase about whether being more scrupulous because of this, because your life is on the line potentially. But I think that may not be as accurate because in the guilt phase, they're just saying you're guilty. But then in the sentencing phase, now it's like, all right, now we got to think whether we're going to either put you in the jail for life in prison or we're going to kill you. You know what I'm saying? So I think if you truncate it in that way, you may have there is I think a moral difference in that sense. And I think it attacks your first premise. But then I also think just when you talk about finality, there are a lot of assumptions you laid on. You laid on the assumption.
Oh no doubt.
You know what I mean?
Assumptions.
So yeah. So what I'm just saying, just on the pure, just naked truth of it all, is that yes, death penalty cases are scrutinized at a definitely a higher degree than life imprisonment. But I think at the end of the day, the thing is, if that person is put to death, that ends all legal battles, right? Versus someone who's still alive. Though technically, but if new evidence is found, people will be out there know they have these persons. It happens all the time.
Couple thoughts are just super chats. James Knight gives us $4.99, says love your videos. Thank you, James. Thank you for being part of the 10,000 strong uncivilian army. $4.99 says Nate rocks. Nate does rock. Thanks, Nate is awesome, and he helps me think in a very literal sense of the word. So it's appreciated. Tony Nevis gives us $10 and says, hi lads, love the good death penalty discussion. What do y'all think of this troll doll and lol surprise girl doll controversy? I have no idea what any of the words in this sentence mean.
Tony, give me a link, Tony. We'll check it out.
Yeah, but you see, again, it's like the finality of the death penalty stops review, but so does the finality of you dying in prison stops review. So like again, it's like up until that point, it's like what gives you you might have more time in the life imprisonment without parole case, although it's not necessarily clear that you necessarily do. But more time doesn't necessarily mean more review because the time is more in one, but the strength of the review is so high in death penalty cases that like I don't know. It might be the case that if you have 10 years in a death penalty case and 30 years in a non-death penalty case, that those are like the same thing. I mean, I'm making a lot of assumptions along the way, but the review is so much higher that maybe I'm getting collective more man hours and level of scrutiny. So 10 years is like 30 years. Yeah. 5 years from Nuvi, who says, make sure to sub to Nuvi. Everyone should sub to Nate because Nate also deserves to have a 10,000 party. Don't do the premiere thing, Nate. It was a mistake. That's my only advice on that one.
Nate Nervy is my brother. We're both uni rockers, baby. Boom, right? Yeah. that's my brother. But no, you know what? It's interesting. I wrote. I was writing because I'm actually preparing for a case that I have now. But I was writing for the hedge clipper case. I was writing. I wrote a closing for just in case that I was just playing around. I was like, let me write a closing. What would my argument be against in the Supreme Court if it was now I forget the name of it. If we were having what's the seize my body now my brain is going. If you're saying the state seized your body illegally, what's it called?
Habeas?
Habeas corpus, yes. Yeah. So if we go to Supreme Court habeas corpus, and I would actually make the argument that for that hedge clipper case, that's the same thing as Sharia law. I would say because in Sharia law, for instance, Sharia law, they chop off your hands and send you. If you could, of course, they chop off your hands and you're alive and they send you away. How many people, if this guy got life imprisonment, I would say my client would choose to get his hand cut off than life imprisonment without the possibility to parole. If someone came up to you right now and said, either you're convicted, you're going away for life, or chop one hand off and you go free. That's a hell of a choice. That's not an easy choice to make. It's not like I'm saying, all right, just give me life in prison. I'm like, all right, well, I can do a lot. Which hand are we talking about? You know what I'm saying? The left hand or the right hand? There's a lot of decisions.
Are there other members of your body you'd have to think about harder?
Well,
catch my drift.
Things that'll keep me alive. No, but what I want to do,
I think Nate missed my drift.
No, I got it.
Okay.
But as long as it keeps me alive. But what I mean by that is, it's if you think about when you put it in that terms, if you were there and that question was posed to you, which would you rather have? Yeah. I don't know which one I would rather take. I know for a fact it's not an easy answer, and I would likely choose my hand being cut off and set free than life in prison without the possibility of parole. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Well, then I guess we also have to figure out the redressability of the error. So if you're actually innocent, you have to factor in the probability that information will come to light. And if they chopped off your hand, then presumably you're in host. Unless maybe I get a robot hand at the end, but that'd be sweet.
No. This is the finality of it. You've gone to Supreme Court. It's locked up. It's done.
Okay.
Either you could go to Saudi Arabia and get your hand cut off, or you go to Louisiana and go to jail for the rest of your life. Those are your only two options.
I don't know. The hand thing doesn't sound too bad. I can get like a robot hand. That'd be sweet.
And what you're saying right now, that means Sharia law. You would rather live in a Sharia law than a Louisiana, because if you steal hedge clippers, obviously there's a little bit more to that. But and I think that's the best argument. You know what I'm saying? It's worse than Sharia law.
I can be like Dr. No with the hand that can just crush things. That's cool, man. Yeah, old school Bond, man. Yep, Dr. No here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So what's number one on our list tonight?
Well, I think it has to be a fond farewell to the DA from Georgia responsible for the ongoing persecution, and I use that word with very deliberation, for the cop involved in the shooting in the Wendy's.
Does everybody know what happened to that guy?
Yeah, I think everyone knows that the story on that one. So the cops come to, in case you somehow missed that memo, the cops come to a guy who is parked in a Wendy's drive-thru. He is passed. Well, I don't know if he was passed out at the time, but whatever. He was parked he was drunk. The cops wake him up, and they then proceed to interact with this guy for about 45 minutes. At the end of which he then tries to fight. They try to arrest him. They get into a fight, a physical fight. They try to tase him. The bad guy tries to swipe at them with the taser he took off. Then he starts running away, and he tries to fire the tasers in the direction of the police, and the police shoot him. Now, to me, using standard self-defense theory 101 plus statements from the very DA that is now no longer a DA, who said that tasers are a lethal weapon like 4 weeks before all this happened. To me, using standard self-defense law 101, I'm like, this seems like a perfectly righteous shoot. There was a fight. There was an imminent threat, and blah, blah, blah. And then the DA decided to not thank this guy, but instead charge him with 12 crimes, including felony murder, whatever this is. And Nate and I are looking at this and you have got to be insane. This doesn't make any sense. The video is there and for us to see. And the things that they were trying to claim that the cops whatever, I'm it doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. So they said, oh, the person wasn't a threat because it was a deadly weapon, even though 4 weeks earlier I said it was. And they should have known the taser didn't have any more shots in it, because that definitely seems like a thing that someone can do, is count. I'm you're going to be able, you really want to be able to count to 2 while this is all ongoing? I'm good luck with that plan. Why don't you try to count to 2 while all this is happening?
That reminded me of you remember that Dirty Harry scene?
Yeah.
Where they put the gun, he's
I fire 6 shots or only 5.
Honestly, I lost count. Right?
Yeah, it's you want them to be able to. It's like, you want them to be able to count to 2 while there is physical threat and ongoing panic and all the rest of them. Like, there's no way any of this is happening.
But I think if you look at the totality of the circumstances, this cop had just taken a flush right to the head, right?
That too.
Right there. So
that doesn't help.
Is going to put you in a state where it's like, oh my, what's happening? And then he's chasing this guy, and the guy points the taser at him. It's like what more do you really need? And again, what I think is that this DA, I honestly think what's happening to this cop is borderline criminal. To be honest with you, it's borderline malicious. It's not. I believe it is malicious prosecution. Let me not even mince words. Usually, I try to be political. What's happening to this cop is malicious prosecution, because I think no matter what you can say about that situation, there's nothing that cop did in that whole situation that showed that he was angry. He was literally responding to what the defendants or to what this guy was doing. And at the end of the day, it's I like to call them, I think Donut Operator says it. It's lawful, but it's awful. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's lawful, but it's awful.
No, it was a complete illogical. Well, first of all, I'm not even sure it was lawful because of how bad what the prosecutor is doing. It just does not make any logical sense of what's going on.
No, I'm talking about the shooting. The shooting was
the shoot. Yeah, I agree with that. No problem. It was completely proper. I was just trying to see if I could load up the article so that we have a basis to just review or see what's going on.
Oh yeah, I got it. I'll just screen share. I got it. Hey, I got it up already. I'm on it, brother.
There we go. Yeah, we made herstory. Nice. we made herstory. Let's see if I can make that a little. Well, no, I can't. Fannie Willis poised to become first woman DA in Georgia's county, and then I'll make this a little bit bigger here. Long-standing Fulton County prosecutor, who in recent ways gained national attention for persecution of white police officers in the killing of Rashard Brooks, was trounced in a primary. Paul Howard, who has the first black district attorney in Georgia when he assumed office, was crushed by Fannie, who secured more than 73% of the vote. That's pretty bad.
Yes.
That's pretty bad. We all made herstory. There's no Republican qualified in making Willis effectively the new district attorney. My staff and I will do what is right every time. Well, if you want to dismiss with prejudice anytime and maybe issue an apology, that would be super helpful. Just one of those things. That'd be great.
One thing I do like is that he lost by so much. It wasn't even close. Like this wasn't even this wasn't like it was 73% to something like 23% or something like that. It was like some horrible win. But one thing I do think that this brings me hope that you can't bullshit everybody all the time, and it seems like the people and the voters in Atlanta was like, hey, this guy needs to go because whatever he's doing is just not working. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Howard had charged Rolfe, the guy who did the shooting, with felony murder and 10 other counts. What insanity is this? I mean, it doesn't make any logical sense. It wasn't really a close case. There was video of the whole thing, and they still prosecuted this guy. I'm like, you couldn't get a civil conviction. Even without qualified immunity, you still couldn't get a civil conviction because the guy acted in good faith. Even if we were on old school law where we were on like what a reasonable officer would do before we had QI, we still wouldn't be able to convict this guy because he had a reasonable good faith belief. In fact, if it were me as a civilian, you couldn't come after me. I would be protected, let alone let the government. If I were in a situation like this, and assuming I have the right to conduct the arrest, so we'll look past that issue, but assuming I can get that far, then he's coming at me, he's violently resisting me, and he's actively trying to come at me with a weapon, and as he's running away, pointing the weapon in my direction, trying to fire at me. If that doesn't give me just cause, I mean, what are we even talking about, Nate? What are we even talking about?
You're gonna, what? It's funny because Robert Barnes, and if you guys don't know, Robert Barnes at Viva Free, they do a thing too. They do, I think, once a week. It's fantastic. I love Robert Barnes and Viva, so check them out too. But one thing Robert put up was a CNN lawyer on CNN. So she goes on CNN and she's like, "Oh my God, this is so awful. It's a taser. Tasers aren't deadly weapons." Then she says this. She says, "Well, the way you know it is that when a taser doesn't magically become a deadly weapon in the black guy's hands and not a deadly weapon in the cop's hands." And when she said that, I was like, "This is the stupidest attorney in the world."
Yeah.
You know what happens?
Yeah.
She doesn't know what she's talking about, and I hate to say that against. She's a beautiful black woman too, and probably a phenomenal attorney. But it's when you can't go on TV and talk nonsense like that. And let me tell you the reason why she's wrong. Because what happens is police officers are trained with tasers. They're trained how to use batons. They're trained how to use their weapons. And the reason why, like for instance, if I had an ash baton in my hands, it would not be a deadly weapon because I'm trained not to hit you in your head, not to hit you in your neck. I'm trained how to use it to not kill you. With tasers, the same thing. They're trained not to shoot you in your neck and in your eye and in soft targets like that, and where to place the taser so it doesn't become. Now, even though the taser itself is considered a deadly weapon, it's considered a deadly weapon if you're not trained to use it correctly. The officers are trained to use it correctly, and if they use it correctly in a lawful way, then that's why it's not considered a deadly weapon. So it just boggles the mind that people, especially people who you consider to be qualified in saying things like this, who can go out there and make such outrageous statements, just, and CNN puts them on. It put this woman on to say that, not just, and the simple answer is, the reason why is because police officers are trained months at a time how to use this, so it's not a damn deadly weapon. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense to me. And just for by way of the chat, because I think the chat might be confused because there are two instances of Georgia that were notable. We're talking about the Ralph incident in the Wendy's parking lot, not the Ahmaud Arbery incident with him running away from the homeowners and the pickup truck. Two different instances in Georgia. So I think some of the chat is talking about burglary and stuff. So I'm only assuming that some of the chat got confused and think we were talking about Ahmaud Arbery. Different case, also in Georgia.
But can I answer? Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying we were talking about this officer Rolfe and his shooting in this Wendy's parking lot and him being charged with felony murder.
I want to answer one of the questions in the chat. They're saying that burglary is inherently a violent crime, and that's just not true. Burglary is a property crime, so it's not inherently violent, even though sometimes you need to have a felony or take some theft, because you can have a burglary in an empty house. So they could be on vacation. You could burglarize the house, and your intent to go into the house and steal, that would be a burglary because it's a dwelling. So burglaries aren't inherently violent felonies.
Yeah, we might have to have a discussion about what qualifies as violent or not, because some of the people in Black Lives Matter land seem to think that nothing that doesn't involve a person can be violent. So arson isn't violent, and busting into people's businesses, looting, pillaging. Pillaging isn't violent as long as no one gets hurt. Apparently, I'm not quite sure that works.
No, if you read the Louisiana the dissent for the Louisiana Supreme Court, and in there it goes through, like with the guy who the hedge clipper guy, it goes through that he was convicted of a burglary, but the burglary was not violent crime. If there were people in the house at the time, then it would become a violent crime. Or if it, like you're saying, property damage and things of that nature. But if it's just somebody sneaking in and stealing something, then it's not really considered a violent crime. So.
Yeah, well, I'm very, very glad that this person, who incidentally was under investigation for corruption in Georgia, this DA, who was under investigation for their own corruption, like we've never seen that ever before. What's it with DAs and corruptions, Nate? You want to tell us about what it is? What's up with DAs and corruption?
It's weird because, like, even here in the Bronx, like when I worked for the Bronx DA, we had one DA who was there, right? And he wanted his hand-picked successor, but he didn't want to have an election. So you know what he did? He ran, right? Knew he wasn't going to fill out the term, so he ran. And then since he won, then he gets to pick like his replacement. So that he picked this.
Like as a deputy who will take the position when he resigns?
Exactly.
Nice trick.
Instead of resigning right before and then letting everybody go through the process. So
that's legal and dirty, but yeah, I respect that. It's legal. At least it's legal.
Yeah, it's the game.
Yeah, at least it's legal, so that's a plus. But yeah, this is completely messed up. Yeah, apparently, Collins is trying to get William Barr to investigate this case to see if
He
the
should.
feds want to. Yeah, see if
He
the feds
should.
want to do anything about this. Yeah, in
No,
terms of enforcing a Republican form of government, that'd be nice.
no, but that prosecution is something the Justice Department should obviously look into, because it's wrong what they're doing to that cop. Let's call it what it is. Let's not mince words. It's wrong what they're doing to that cop. You know what I'm saying? It's just wrong.
Yeah, it's totally wrong. Let us move on to the U.S. Justice Department. The U.S. Justice Department just put out a memo about Yale and discrimination. So let us just cover that real fast. Share my screen, and we will read that, and then we will respond to it, like Tim Pool style.
Yeah. All right.
That Tim is Pool totally unhelpful in every way.
Tim Pool is the most famous article reader on YouTube.
Yeah, he is. And there's some drama going on right now because his longtime friend Adam left the show for mysterious personal reasons. What could it be? It could be anything. No, that's not helpful.
He reads the news well.
Yeah. All right. So Justice Department, the United States Justice Department. Justice Department finds Yale illegally discriminated against Asians and whites in undergrad admissions in violation of federal civil rights law. The Department of Justice today notified Yale University of its findings that Yale illegally discriminates against Asian Americans and white applicants in its undergrad admissions in violation of Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The findings are a result of a 2-year investigation. There is no such thing as a nice form of race discrimination. I like that. That's a nice little thing.
That's a good
well, yeah, nice little line there. Unlawfully dividing Americans into race and ethnic blocks foster stereotypes, bitterness, and division. It's past time for Americans institutions to recognize all people should be treated with decency and respect and without regard to color. Yeah. As a condition of receiving millions of dollars in taxpayers' funding, because Yale is technically private, right? They're a private school?
Yeah, private school.
Yeah, but the Civil Rights Act applies to any school that accepts federal funding, including
grants.
Yeah. So basically, that's all the universities ever. So that's how you get your jurisdiction there, and also because of interstate commerce. Yale as a condition of this, Yale expressly wants to comply with the act, a cornerstone law, found discriminates on the basis of law. Its undergraduate admission process for the majority of applicants, Asian Americans and whites have only 1/10 to 1/4 the likelihood as African Americans with comparable academic credentials. Yale rejects scores of Asian American and white applicants each year. Although the Supreme Court has held colleges may consider race in limited circumstances as one of factors, the Department of Justice found Yale's use of race is anything but limited. Yale uses race as multiple steps in a multiplied effect of applicant and admission. The Department of Justice demanded Yale to agree not to use race in its upcoming undergraduate cycle. If Yale proposes to consider race, it must. This is a nice little touch here. So going to like the southern states with the Voting Rights Act, and they must have pre-approval. The Supreme Court incidentally ruled that unconstitutional, but whatever, they're modeling it after that. If Yale proposes to consider race or national origin in future administration cycles, it must first submit to the Department of Justice a plan demonstrating its proposal. That's nice little things, and so you can actually see the notice.
But this has like no teeth to it. You know what I'm saying? This is just
Yale's going to absolutely fight it. Yale's going to absolutely fight it every step of the way.
This is the Harvard. This is Harvard 2 years ago that the judge.
The judge in the Harvard case came out with a very well-informed opinion because he and everyone else on the face of the earth knows this case is going all the way.
But this is the Grutter gloss from Michigan. This is Fisher v. Texas. This is the same case over and over again, and it's always the same thing. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, because I'm throwing out Supreme Court cases, what happens is that most, and this may be shocking to the audience, but most in higher education, Black people weren't allowed in these colleges. Shocking, right? Shocking. Who knew? So what happens is that when the Civil Rights Act, actually we're talking about the 14th Amendment, when the Civil Rights Act came in and affirmative action came, the idea was to right the wrongs of the past, right? To now have access to these schools in a way where you can have Black applicants, have at least to be competitive to get into these schools. So first you had a case, I forgot the name of the case, where the school just outright had a quota. It was like, we need X amount of Black people in the school, right? So that was their admissions policy. We need a minimum of 12 Black people. The Supreme Court ruled that unconstitutional because they said, well, that's just plainly basing this on race, right? That's blatantly placing it on race. You can't just do that. So so Justice Stevens on the court brought up what they call the Stevens anomaly. The Stevens anomaly was saying that the 14th Amendment was meant to give Black people access to things like this, like higher education, but now it's become a shield to not allow the government to right the wrongs of the past. So in a stunning decision, so Stevens said, no case, affirmative action is more or less dead. So the Republicans on the Supreme Court at the time, what's his name, Justice O'Connor, she and the Republican justices wanted to show that there would be a case, that there's a way that you could actually use race in an admissions process that would be constitutional. And that's where you get Grutter. In Grutter, what they did was the school used race as one of many factors. And what they did was saying, okay, we want a diverse class. So in hopes of diversity in legal education and law school, what we're going to do is say, okay, well, we don't want to have no Black students because that's going to hurt the educational experience. So we want to have some. So we're going to use race as a factor for diversity. And that was deemed constitutional. It wasn't it wasn't we need an X amount of Black students, but we need Black students so we can have a better educational system. And then then you went to Fisher for the University of Texas, Fisher v. the University of Texas, with the same type of issue. It was a white student who, had the same qualifications, but again, and that was found constitutional because of the gloss. Okay, yeah, you don't want to have it where you just don't have any Black students. And that's the same thing that happened in the Harvard case. Harvard used race as one of the factors, and many factors, and that's what is going on with Yale. Yale is using race as a factor, as one of many factors. So this situation seems to be constitutional. But now, if it's right and if it's moral, that's a whole different story. But I believe what's going on in Yale is constitutional, as based on Supreme Court precedent.
Well, it certainly can be based on the precedent. Whether or not Yale has gone too far, in fact, is a whole nother set of considerations. And I think this is part of what the Department of Justice was trying to allude to, that if you're looking at a 1 in 10 or 1 in 4 relative, that suggests that you're using it more than just a simple weight or a thumb on the scale. It's something a little bit more. If you're using it every step of the process so that it's more of a systemic, because it's part of the system, it's part of a systemic and bad bias, then that might be a problem.
But see, and this is why I think sometimes you got to go back, because when you sent me this article, you got to go into the details, right? They give you one fact and say, here's the fact, right? And this is the fact.
There's also a DOJ memo, so of course they're going to write it a particular way, right?
So they're giving you this one fact. This is the bad fact. But then when you look at all the other facts, you say, okay, so this is not really what we're seeing. For instance, if you look at the amount of Black students in Yale only account for 4% of the student population, where Asians account for almost like 20%. I think I had that place. It was like the high teens. Matter of fact, second only to whites. Whites are about 46%, and Asians are number 2 on the list. So so you're talking about 4% of the student population. You're saying that because we let in 4% Blacks is somehow not good enough for the 16 or 17% of Asians, when African Americans are 13% of the population. It's even based on population alone. It's not even right. So there are a lot of other different things. For instance, applications. There are a lot less applicants who happen to be Black. You know what I'm saying? And if you're talking about just having a diverse school system, there are a lot less African Americans who can even have the qualifications to apply to law school. And that now, I used to I was one of the admissions officers in the law school that I worked at, right? And that was one of our issues. We had so many candidates who were African American, but were just not academically able to do the work. So when you had one that was able to do the work, then obviously there would be a preference, because you're already behind the hole. If you didn't let that person in, then you would almost have no African Americans and you would have no diversity in the class. So obviously it's not just a simple, if we have an Asian student and a Black student who have the same numbers, then we're going to let the Black student in. It is, well, I have 1,000 Asian students with these numbers and I got 2 Black students with these numbers. So yeah, I've let in my 800 Asians, but now I gotta, for diversity reasons, I'd have to let in some Black students, and I've had to make those decisions. It's funny because I've had to make those decisions, and it's a tough decision to make. But then you look at the overall class, You look at, who you got coming in, and you're saying, well, now, how can we have the student body have an experience that is not, that is not monolithic? That, it's funny because on my last year there, we did have a black Trump supporter who was admitted, and that was, that was really pretty interesting. But that is the goal. The goal is not to hold two people up and say, I'm choosing you because you're black and choosing you because you're Asian. It's trying to say, well, we want to have a diverse student population so people get to meet other people. And in Yale, I still don't think it's diverse enough. Only 4% of the people there are black. And think about this. They're saying that's too much. That's too much. 4% is too much. We want less than that. I don't know what you do. I don't know what you do.
Well, it reminds me of a couple things. The first thing that comes to mind is, for strangely enough, perhaps, but orchestra auditions. 10 years ago, people were so thrilled because a lot of orchestras went blind. They literally put up curtains so they can't see who's performing, and they literally just judge it on the sound. They require everyone to take off their shoes, so you can't even hear the sounds of heels or something. And they when they're auditioning for a new violinist or whatever, everyone come off prepared behind a curtain, and it's just based on the sound is how they do it. And I was seeing some articles relatively recently saying that we should end blind auditions because because they're completely race blind, because literally no one can see. They're everything blind. They're race sex blind because no one can see. But because the orchestras are not diverse enough, we should end the being literally blind because we have blindfolds on, as it were. We should end the literally blind auditions because we need to have more diversity. And the same thing here. My initial thought is, if we could come up with a system that judges people on the merits, in a totally blind way, that would be the most optimal system. We should figure out who the most qualified people to be there are. And if we want to have diversity beyond that, then we can look to regional diversity, maybe. I think economic diversity is a far more interesting personally than racial diversity.
Yeah.
If you look at the numbers on the income quintile, it is not 20% from every quintile that's that's there, right? It skews rich. So if you want to skew for something, skew for poverty, skew for regional diversity, but skewing for race is just problematic.
Well,
I'm with Scalia. The best way to stop discriminating on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race.
Yes, yeah. Now, to be honest with you, I love Scalia, and I love Scalia's dissent to VMI. I think it's one of the best dissents. If you guys want to read a great dissent, read his dissent to VMI. It's fantastic. But I disagree with him on this point. There's a history and there's an understanding that you have to have about both access and opportunity. It's like, and I know people don't like to hear this, but I'll tell you from my own perspective, right? From my own perspective, I was one of the top students in my law school, right? I ended law school with like a 3.7 GPA. So
nice.
It was great. I actually took the bar while I was in law school. I got into a program. We had a Provost Scholar program that the top law students can get into. And if you get into it, you take the bar while you're in law school. So while I was in law school, I was actually licensed in law school. So that's my experience. But before we got there, I went to one of the worst public schools in the nation, right? Because we were in Harlem, one of the poorest public schools. I failed out of high school, right? It was all horror. But I was sitting in a law school. I was sitting next to someone who had none of those issues, right? They had great schools, they had great things, they had all of this stuff. Now, the sad part about it is that most of the people who look like me from my neighborhood have the same issues, right? One single family homes, it's a lot of terrible stuff. And when I still go to my parties for my friends at law school, not now because of social distancing, they were in Long Island. They have great homes, great families, great communities, that type of thing. And I say that to say this: if we could just do it blind, I would say yes, to each his own, right? It makes sense. But we know that there's a competitive advantage to a certain segment of the population, both Asian, both African Americans, and this disadvantage. I'm not saying that we should give someone a pass just because they're black, because that's going to set them up for failure. I've seen that happen in law school. There was someone who they let in just because, I believe, just because they were black, and they failed out the first semester. And matter of fact, there was two guys. It was one was in the class right above me, and they brought him back in for the next one. He failed out. But he was black, and they needed some more black guys.
Well, they call it mismatch when you have people who are mismatched, and it doesn't
Yes.
do anyone favors, because, as you point out, you bring in someone who's not academically on par with everyone else. So by comparison, if nothing else, they're going to necessarily be lower in the class, and they have a higher risk of falling out, a higher risk of never re-enrolling somewhere else. So it may not be to their advantage to be in a school that they're not academically prepared for.
Yes, and I'll say this: my class was, I think, 170 students. Only 6 of us were black, and out of the 6 of us who were black men, 6 of us who were black men, and out of the 6 of us who were black men, 3 of them failed out the first semester. So there's only 3 of us graduated after that. So just to show you, like it was just that bad. But I say that to say this: it's about opportunity, access, and if everyone else had the same educational background and the same opportunities, then I can say yes, put the blinds up and let them compete just like everyone else. But that's just not the reality of it. You know what I'm saying? So right now you're trying to fix the project.
Then the problems are long preceding the university level. I mean, the problems that we're really trying to address here are somewhere in the K through 12 environment, and I don't know what the answers to those problems are, but if the fact is that blacks on average don't have the same credentials as their white counterparts to apply to Yale, that's a problem somewhere lower down on the system. So trying to correct for it at the Yale is kind of like trying to fix it after the horse has left the barn. Yeah,
you're too late. And you're right. And again, this is from you're talking about like economic disadvantages and economic. You're talking about things like redlining, where the average amount of wealth in a black family is what, $15,000, where the average wealth of a white family is $250,000. So just those disparages in wealth and economics, I think they come to bear when it comes to trying to get ahead and get to that. And I don't want to make this seem like it's a Democrat versus Republican thing, because even in New York, we still have the same problem. The worst schools in New York are in the black neighborhood.
The most racist schools are the ones in New York City. I love that one from John Oliver. It's like, we're going to talk about racism in schools, and you think we're going to talk about the South, but no, New York City, you were the racist the whole time. It's like,
we have the most segregated schools.
Yeah, you're the most segregated schools in the country.
And think about this: we have a mayor, our mayor, Bill de Blasio, who I hate to death, but we have a man named Bill de Blasio. We have a school system here called Success Academy Charter Schools. They are outperforming the public schools by, like, for instance, like 100% of the kids who go to the Success Academy Charter School in Harlem pass the math state test, right? 98% of them pass the reading test. If you go to the school right next door, only 20 to 30% of those students are passing the test, right? Mm-hmm. Guess what schools Bill de Blasio wants to close? He wants to close the charter schools.
I'm sure he does.
And you think about it, this is not the South. If you said this was happening in Texas,
well, the only way to make everyone equal is to bring everyone down.
Yes,
or at least the easiest way to make everyone equal. If everyone has nothing, then they're real equal. Everyone has equal number of bones to gnaw on. That kind of thing.
Like I'm doing my next 2 videos. One of my videos are going to be, the most racist, the most segregated place in America, New York City. And people don't understand. For instance, when we talk about racism and policing, in New York City, they were stopping and frisking. None of the people they're stopping and frisking happened to be black, right? And think about this. I was out there doing this too, which is sad. But let's say in New York City, we had a problem with marijuana arrests. Something like 80% of the people who were being arrested for marijuana use, actually 89% of the people who were minorities. Mm-hmm. But they were finding, this is what they were finding, that when they stopped both black and white people, they had the same amount of marijuana on them, right? Blacks and whites. So they were trying to find out, well, why the hell are not, if you're black or minority, you're 9 times more likely to get arrested for this. But that's because that's the way the system was built. The system in New York was built that if you are black, we wanted to stop you, wanted to frisk you. And if you're a white, in a white neighborhood, you weren't being stopped and frisked, and you were being let go with warnings. Where if you're in a black neighborhood, you were being arrested. So this is what we're talking about. And New York wants to sit there and demean places like Texas. But the problem isn't Texas. The problem isn't down there. The problem is here in New York. Malcolm X said it best. The white liberals in New York want to be racist, but don't want to acknowledge their own problems, but yet say that the problem is in the South. The problem is here too, and I think we have to own it, and we have to adjust to it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying all black people are good people and they all do, they're all saints and walk on. We do bad things too, but I think the reality is that we have to find out a way where we can take these racial disparities, and do something in which it doesn't seem like everything is based on race, right? Mm. And I think the only way you're going to do that is like what you were saying earlier. We have to find a way to there's an economic piece here that needs to be talked about, and that's what we have.
And I think looking at it in terms of economics is just naturally less inflammatory than looking at it about race. I think if you try to look at things in class, it doesn't raise the same concerns with people. Yeah. Because we have, if we can figure out trying to figure out how to help the poor is always a problem. Jesus himself said the poor will always be with us. So trying to figure out how to deal with that problem is really interesting. I don't have the most educated opinion on it, but I thought UBI was an interesting idea at least, and it appealed to some of my Republican sensibilities, especially if you did it as a complete substitution for all current government programs. Because if you gave everyone $1,000 a month, that naturally impacts the poor the most. Because if you're the kind of person that only has an income of $10,000, you just got a 10% raise. If you have $100,000, you just got a 1% raise. If you have $1 million, you just got a 0.1% raise. So the comparative advantage of even $1,000 for everybody impacts the poor the most. I'm like, okay, well, that's a really interesting idea. And then if you did it as a complete substitution, that reduces the size of government because you don't need 3 billion programs. A lot of problems with the current programs in place is they have different cutoffs. So you wind up in these gaps where, like, you can wind up in a situation where by earning more, you actually lose benefits. And so it's to your disadvantage. Yeah. It's to your disadvantage to get a raise because you actually wind up worse off because of the different programs coming in different places. And it's like, okay, so you have no disincentive to working more because we'll give you the money no matter what you do. So that's nice. And you get to keep the money no matter what happens. I'm like, okay, that's kind of nice. Now, I don't know if that necessarily solves everything, you'd have to actually work through the math on it. But it presents some interesting ideas.
Well, the inflation problem. You have the inflation problem.
Well, not necessarily because if you did it as you'd have to again look at the numbers. But if you just took the same amount of money the government is currently spending on all social welfare and all social programs, and you took that amount of money, whatever it is, and you said, well, instead of spending that money the way we're currently doing it, I'm going to take all that money and put it in a big pile and just split it up evenly. I'm injecting no more money than I was before, so it shouldn't have any impact.
So it would be a net zero cost.
It should be, yeah. If I figured it out correctly, it should be a net zero on inflation. Yeah, and at least you want to ideally have a very modest level of inflation, at least in standard economic theory. But so you don't want to be it's all maybe doable, but it's like. The funny thing is about it, like I said this before, it's like, you'd actually have an easier time probably getting the Republicans on board than the Democrats. The Democrats would never agree to get rid of Social Security. They never agree to get rid of, the grant programs in places. All the they love that you could probably get the Republicans to vote for it before the Democrats. That's hilarious, but it's probably true.
But you know what? This is a good transition to Kamala Harris. What do you think? Now I'm going to say it. This is the most, I'll say, conservative. I'm using that word on purpose.
I'd say authoritarian.
Democratic ticket. Only reason I'm saying that because Joe Biden is really a conservative Democrat. He was been a conservative Democrat for all his career.
Mm-hmm.
And now that even though he's Obama's vice president, and as you can see, he's rejecting a lot of those progressive ideas. Like he said, if he's more or less saying if what's it called, if Medicare for all hits his desk, he's not signing that. So so Joe Biden is not a progressive, and Kamala Harris, she's former DA, and she's pretty much sitting in the road too. So it's interesting.
I think she's a little bit more left leaning personally. I mean, some of her
Mhm.
votes are very left leaning, and some of the things she said on the campaign trail are very left leaning.
Mhm.
So
but she's not as right as Joe Biden. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying she's not the progressive. She's not like an AOC or even a Nancy Pelosi, right? She's further right than they are.
I think she has some really unfortunate authoritarian qualities that make me very concerned. Her experience as a prosecutor and AG, and some of the stuff that she did and got busted for in courts in terms of withholding evidence and denying people evidence and denying people Brady material, including people on death row, and so forth and so on. She seems like she's a little opportunist, and she'll use power to take advantage of her. So I'd say she's authoritarian, left leaning. So I'm very concerned. I mean, she's a cop. Didn't we say ACAB like very recently? Wasn't that a thing from the left flank about that? It's like, how are we feeling about the ACAB right now with Camila the cop about to become the next president of the United States?
You don't think Biden's going to make it? You don't think he's going to make it?
Well, he himself said he's a transitional figure, and no, I don't think he's going to make it very far. I think Biden is very, very weak, and I think that Biden is going to be completely overrun. I don't think Biden has. I mean, he's tired. He doesn't remember where he is. I think that the left flank is going to take over, and Biden is just a complete figurehead, and Camila is really the one going to be in charge.
Well, don't forget, Biden, I think, is the answer to the. Biden is the moderate. We want the Obama voter who voted for Trump. That's who that is, and we want those independents who don't like Trump. That's what Biden gets you. Biden gets you. You know what? I'm a conservative, but I don't mind voting for Joe Biden. Joe Biden was against the busing. He's against this. Joe Biden. If Joe Biden was just running on his record, he could. He could actually put an R in front of his name and run. You know what I'm saying? Because his record. 3 strikes rule laws, all this stuff.
Joe Biden, that's a poison pill now on the left. They don't want to talk about the crime bill. They don't want to talk about the stuff that both Biden and Harris have problems on that.
But I'm gonna, why I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna disagree with you with that. Because they're running against Trump.
Okay.
It's not a poison pill running against. It's a poison pill running against any other Republican, but running against Trump, it's not a poison pill for them. It actually helps them get those conservative voters. Like I wouldn't run away from that if I was them, because I don't need to energize the base.
But they're going to lose. But they're going to lose some of their left because of that. Because there's so much anti-police sentiment right now, and that's a problem, don't you think?
Even though I agree, but it's either them or Trump. It's that's what you get, and it's like those lefties, the radical left, have no choice. They have to vote for Joe Biden, right? They want Trump out. They have TDR, Trump derangement syndrome.
That's true.
They will vote. They're going to vote for Biden. To say that they're going to sit on home, they're going to say, "Oh, we're not going to go out and vote this time for Biden." After how much they hate Trump, they're voting for Trump. They're locked in. I would not be talking to the radical left at all, right? I don't need them. I got their vote. They're in my pocket. I want those independents, those right-wing Democrats, those who I want to target, and that's who they should be targeting. Again, that would be my plan. I might just be out of around here. So
no, I think that's relatively right, and there's a lot of time left in terms of this election. But Kamala Harris was so unpopular with the Democrats. Here's what I don't understand. I don't understand what Kamala Harris brings to the party. She doesn't bring any black votes.
No,
Biden already had the black vote. It's one of the reasons he won over Bernie. Kamala Harris had like 2% of the vote. She dropped out before her own primary.
She lost the black vote to the white guy.
She doesn't bring California. They're going to win that by 30 points. She can't bring over people from the left. I mean, they're not going to. There's no one who's like on the far left who's going to be particularly excited about Kamala. I don't really understand what she brings to the table. I thought Rice was a far more interesting pick. for VP, and I think Rice doesn't have the same disadvantages as Harris. I think Harris has a more negative impression. At least from my perception, I think Harris is more negative in Republicans than Rice. I
Look
think
at
she brings less people than Rice. I think Rice's foreign policy experience would have been very beneficial. So
yeah.
I don't really get it.
Look at what Valerie's getting super chick. Valerie Kefefe. Um, she put today's strategy crashed and burned in 2016. But we're talking about different candidates. I had trouble voting for Hillary Clinton, right? Hillary Clinton was not a good candidate. Not in 2016. Hillary Clinton was really a Trump Democrat, more or less. I think now you have 4 years of Trump. You got Supreme Court. It's a whole different game this time. Yes, 2016 it wouldn't have worked. I think now it does though.
So from 538, they have their first forecasts up here. Their first initial productions were way early into this, so I wouldn't take this from any kind of salt. But these numbers are. What did Trump finish at in the 2016 election from 538? It was like 35% or something like that. So these numbers are close. These numbers are close to where Trump was in 2016 at the very, very end. But these are the predictions from 538. I like their forecasting, of course. They think that here's where they think that the different vulnerabilities are: Arizona, Florida, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Wisconsin.
I think
chance of winning. States with the closest races: North Carolina, Ohio,
but
Florida.
Don't forget, Trump,
Texas,
all of these have to break for Trump to win.
Yeah, pretty much.
All of these have to break for Trump to win. Biden just has to pick off 2 or 3 of them.
I think that's definitely right.
It's a good map for Biden. I think this is a very good map for Biden. But I still think Trump has a shot, though. I don't think anybody can dismiss Trump. What about the What do you think about the guy? Who's the guy who's picked the winner of the presidential race, the past since the 1970s? He's picked the right winner every year, and he's picking Joe Biden this year.
I don't know about that off the top of my head, and I'm sorry. I've heard of people like that, but it's like there was a cartoon. I think it was 538. Maybe I can find it, where it's like, oh no, maybe it was XKCD, where it was like no one. Let me see if I can find the cartoon because it'll make my point. Where it's like no one has lost the election where this has been true, and it's like for every presidential election, you can always find something where no incumbent has ever lost where X. And every time breaks a precedent, basically is the point of it. Mm-hmm. Talk for a second while I see if I can find out.
No, I forget the guy's name, but he actually predicted Trump was going to win, and he has this weird little thing about keys, and if certain people have so many keys. But now he's saying it's actually harder to get out an incumbent president before you can get a second term. And think about this: the last president not to get a second term was Jimmy Carter. No, actually not Jimmy Carter, George Bush, the second George Bush, right? Well, George Bush won, and that was because of Ross Perot. He had a third-party candidate. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be. I think, but I still think Trump has. I don't think you can sleep on Trump. I don't think you'll sleep on Trump because if you get the vaccine out, that's going to do a lot of good for Trump. For this, because right now I think Trump's numbers are being held down because of the coronavirus. If this game changes, if the vaccine comes out, then he's at another level.
So this was the cartoon I was thinking about from XKCD. It's cartoon 1122 if you want to look it up. And it's basically the problem with statements like no party has won without the state, or no president has been reelected under these circumstances. So this goes through every election since the start and been like, here's a statement that you could make that the next election broke. So every time, no one under 65 has won the presidency. No one who has lost his home state has won. No one with a beard has been reelected for no particular reason. No president's been reelected with double-digit unemployment. Catholics can't win. No left-hand president has been reelected. And then 2012. So it's like you can always make these statements. So with respect to your guy who has a perfect track record since the 70s or whatever, I think that there's many people like that. And it reminds me also of that kind of scam that they did in the Simpsons, where it's like where the professor, geez, I'm trying to remember the name of the joke name they gave, like Professor Pig or something, and he would send out like, here's the winning football picks, and Lisa Simpson figured it out and said, okay, so here's what they're doing every week, and every week they send out two flyers. They're going to win this game or win this game, and like after 10 in a row, there's some small number of people who they've been right for every single time, because you keep dividing by half. So if you have a million people in your city, you send out a million flyers. When you send out 10 of them, you have a statistically small but a number of people who have been right every time, and you can bilk them for all they're worth, which is exactly what was happening. So yeah, I'm sure there's some professor out there who has said, I'm sure it's Trump, and some professor says, I'm sure it's Biden. It's like, well, one of them is going to be wrong. So, wasn't it like the New York Times who said Hillary Clinton had like a 98% chance of winning the election the day before election day? How'd that 98% turn out? I forget.
Hey, it turned out bad for Michigan, Pennsylvania, but I'll say this too: Trump won. People are surprised that Trump won those states, and I wasn't as surprised, because let's take Michigan for example. The Democrats, Obama, Biden, and even Clinton, they took all those manufacturing jobs and sent them overseas, right? And how long can you do that before it comes back to bite you? Especially in those heavy blue states, you got all those manufacturing jobs, all those steel jobs. They're going to Mexico. They're going to, and those people in those states are looking at like, yo, I've been voting for these guys, and these are the people who signed in NAFTA. We need help. We need help, and it wasn't surprising, because I love when Trump went to those states, and he was saying exactly that. These people sent your jobs away, and you're going to vote for them again. That's pretty damn convincing to me, especially if you sat there and you've lost your job, and the guy's saying, yeah, they throwing your jobs away and you're going to vote for them again. Then guess what? I'm going to try something. Now, has Trump brought those jobs back? No, but again, it's a great campaign strategy.
Well, convincing me today is Sean King and also Sean King, who disagree with each other. So Sean King disagrees with Sean King. Sean King in 2018 says, I'll be frank and I'll tell you, two Democrats I'm 99% sure I won't be supporting, primarily because of their dismal history on criminal justice reform over their entire careers. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They both helped build up and advance mass incarceration. And disagreeing with Sean King is Sean King, who says, that's it for me. I'm incredibly proud to see a brilliant black woman and an HBCU grad chosen as the vice presidential nominee. I've done political work my whole life. It's rarely the things that dreams are made of. Kamala Harris is the most progressive VP nominee in American history. Well, you can decide whether or not you agree with Sean King or Sean King on that one. So, yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? It's a two-party system. It's a two-party system. You got it, and then that's why I'm saying, if I was Joe Biden and the team, I would not be catering to that radical left. That's Trump's job. Trump's job is to keep those people involved, to say we don't ever want Trump and we're going to go out and vote. His job, their job right now, is to get those independents and those right-leaning Democrats and maybe pick off some of those left-leaning Republicans. That's their job. That's how they win the election.
Someone asked, what are the chances, in your opinion, there's a chance of third-party vote taking the vote this year? I mean, there's no chance of that, but there's always a chance of the third party being disruptive. I know Kanye got kicked off the ballot in Illinois recently because of some forged votes or whatever. But yeah, maybe Kanye, maybe Yeezy over here takes enough votes to swing the thing. That'd be hilarious. I might vote for Yeezy. I don't know if Yeezy's going to be on the ballot of Texas. Maybe I should throw in a vote for Kanye. That sounds good. I'm on team Kanye.
Oh my God, that's so horrible. I just feel like, but wasn't Kanye? What didn't he say, that he's only running to help Trump win? Like, that's like, really, like, you admit that, and it sounds like what's the agreement, Jill Stein, and I'm surprised nobody talks about. And this is my problem sometimes with the left. They don't talk about their own Russian collusion, because Jill Stein was financed by the Russians to run against.
Preach it, brother. Preach it.
Is that not true?
It is true.
Is that not true? The Russians financed her campaign so she could take votes from Hillary Clinton. But nobody talks about that, though. Nobody, even when they talk about
the Chinese collusion, because it looks like the Chinese might be trying to interfere to get Biden elected as we speak. Yeah, talk about the Chinese collusion.
Nobody's talking about that. But no, and think about this. When I was doing my research for the Mike Flynn video, If you look at Mike Flynn when he's at the table, when he got paid from RT to go to that dinner with Vladimir Putin, look who's next to Vladimir Putin too. It's Jill Stein. She's getting paid to be there too. So it just is what it is.
Yeah, there's many interesting doings here. And speaking of collusion and Flynn, have you recovered from 4 hours of whatever that was on Tuesday? Because I think my soul left my body at some points.
I don't know. I never understand. Like my issue with the with number one, I hated the fact that it was just so political. You can just tell the political,
Yeah.
like, you know, all the leading questions for one side and then open-ended question. It just was like, oh my god. The second thing is, I'll tell you what, the way I would rule it is that I would deny the mandamus, but I would actually go back to, because Sullivan denied Flynn's motion to withdraw his guilty plea. I would actually take that up. I would say, well, the record's already developed on that. Let's take that up, overturn that, and send that back. Then if you send that back with the guilty plea withdrawn, then your 48A motion you have no discretion, because he's withdrawn a guilty plea, and now you can't force the government to continue to prosecute. The case is essentially over, and your mandamus comes back. I think that's the way they should rule. They should actually, since the record is developed, but I don't think they can because nobody brought it up. But you should actually rule on the withdrawal. Have him withdraw his guilty plea. Then the whole, you know, this whole, whether he's in sentencing and whether he's pled guilty, it's off the table. And you're back in prosecution phase 2. Now you're back in the phase where you're talking about prosecutorial discretion, right? Because he's withdrawn his guilty plea. Now you still got to prosecute him. So you know what? We're not prosecuting him anymore. We're dismissing the charges, totally executive. And now you're 100% stone cold legal grounding. And that's what I would do if I was the appellate court. But I don't know if they're going to do that, though.
Yeah. I mean, the funny, you know, it made it most obvious to me because for the first two people, for the government and Flynn, it was just like hypothetical this, hypothetical that. Yeah. And then I started a drinking game where it's like every time a judge mentions the word hypothetical, I'm going to take a drink. And I don't know if I honestly had to take a drink at all from my own rule set. You know, I was taking drinks at that point just because I wanted to. You know, people were in the chat are like, no, don't do it, Kurt. You're going to die, because all I've been hearing from the judges for the last 3 hours at that point, or 2.5 hours, was hypothetical this, hypothetical that. I'm like, okay, I need a drink, and I'm going to do a drink every time a judge mentions the word hypothetical. And then Sullivan's lawyer gets up, and it was just open-ended questions, and it wasn't hypothetical this, it wasn't hostile. It was just like, you are the greatest and most wonderful. Please, what kind of chocolates do you like? You know, do you like walks on the beach? Do you like sunrise? What's better, sunrise or sunset? You know,
it wasn't a good day for the judiciary, but I think the best thing to do, I honestly think the best thing to do is really, if you grab that, because that's the way you get out of this. And click, you kill the mandamus, okay, we'll deny the mandamus, but we're gonna let him withdraw his guilty plea. Yep. And then by doing that, you open up now the 48A is 100% legit, and Sullivan has no choice.
Yeah, I think again, no matter how biased the DC Court of Appeals might be, and they're pretty biased, they have to constrain this, because they don't want to set a precedent with a judge who can ask for a rehearing every time they get a decision they don't like. So no matter what they do, they no matter how bad their Trump derangement syndrome has to be, they are not that insane. Their incentives have to be, at the end of the day, to do whatever they're going to do in such a way that it doesn't open the door to every judge asking for a rehearing from every order that they don't like. And, you know, so I think the odds are pretty decent that I think Viva's right, that they're going to say, by trying to do whatever, by trying to do this, he's injected himself, and he should be removed. So they get to have their cake and eat it too. They get to slap down Flynn for being, you know, horrible, and you still have remedies and whatever, and also get to slap down the judge and make sure that no one ever does this again, because DC Court of Appeals They don't want to deal with this anymore.
Didn't there? But from what I understand, the lower court, the panel decision, two things. The
Yeah.
panel decision asked the judge for his ruling, right, for something. No, did the panel decision?
The panel asked for his comments, yeah, or his filing about something. So that was a good point from the attorneys, where it's like they made him a party. So yeah.
Yeah. And then if you're talking about going from the panel to the full court, that's just it's not like it's not appeal because they can do that sua sponte, right? They can just say, okay, well, we're reversing the panel decision, and it's still considered the same court, so it's not like you're even appealing it to a right.
Yeah, I mean there's that too, but yeah, there's some technical aspects around there that they can dance around if they want to play in that space. So
Well,
yeah.
because I'm saying, I think the standing argument is extremely weak because of these technical issues. Because again,
Sure.
the court can say, "Hey, we're just reviewing a panel decision," and we can do, and so it doesn't need to have. We don't need to have the separate standing requirements for that because the panel's the one that asked them for the initial thing. So we just, we vacated the panel, and now we're going to do it together. So I think the standing issue is kind of irrelevant in terms of whether they can hear. And I think they'll resolve the standing in their opinion. But I still think you're right. I think the mandamus is going to be killed. Hopefully Sullivan will be removed. They'll throw it to some other judge, and that judge will then they'll probably go back and just dismiss the case. Because I think at this point in time, it just should be dismissed. It's like, what are we doing here? You know what I'm saying? What are we doing?
Yeah.
Here?
Yeah, no, I make a point on my channel of trying to say political is not legal and legal is not political, and the DC Court of Appeals en banc was putting that statement to the test in a very unpleasant way. It was not one of the greater demonstrations of the justice system I've ever seen in my life. I think Viva's point that sounded a lot more like a congressional hearing. The only thing that was missing were the judges saying reclaiming my time, because the judges don't have to say that because we're used to it. But that was the only thing missing, was reclaiming my time, and it's like, yeah, and just
Yeah.
but the congressional committees tend to be a little bit better about their following the time rules than the judges were. Jesus Lord,
There are no time rules when you're talking about. It was just crazy. But I think it was good to show people what it's like, being in that hot seat. And I think I really think the Solicitor General, I think he did such a fantastic job, man. This guy's like a super lawyer.
Oh, Wall, yeah, the acting Solicitor General Wall, he was great. He's the best of us, Nate. He I don't know where you go to solicitor school, but geez, man, he was great. And the fact that he was so calm and so even for that long. I mean, I would have lost my temper long ago. I would have done this court as in disorder long before that point. So I don't know where you go to what kind of zen or whatever he's got, but maybe I should put out an email to Mr. Wall, see if he wants to appear on the channel. Maybe
That'd be nice.
See if he wants to pop in and be like, can you teach us your powers of first of all, where do you go to learn to solicitor school? So you learn how to answer these questions. And second of all, are you doing some Zen or breathing or what? You want to tell us some tips? That'd be great.
Because he won't be able to comment on the case because it's still active. But no, he was.
Well, I don't want to comment on the case. I want to talk about how you learned to do the techniques. I don't want to talk about the case.
And let's not forget too. It's like when I was at the DA's office. There was one judge that I would constantly go to, right? That a lot of my cases were in front of. You develop a relationship with that judge, like when you have somebody new, like a new defense counsel, they come in all nervous. Oh my God, and I'm there. Yeah, this judge is a slave driver. Look at me, I'm picking cotton here. My shirt's cotton. The judge is crazy, but I know the judge is not crazy. The judge is cool, and this person, and they just don't have that relationship. But I think that's what he had. He had a very good relationship because he's argued in front of. He's a solicitor for that circuit. So he's probably known all these judges. He's argued there before. He knows what they like to hear. He knows how to argue it. So, and he's a professional. So Wall is definitely Wall made it really, really. He made, I think, Flynn's argument better than, unfortunately, Powell.
Oh yeah, no doubt in my mind. Yeah, no doubt in my mind. Flynn's lawyer was not great. No, Wall was much better for the U.S. government.
But her writing, she writes like a.
She is a better. Yeah, she's a very good writer. Yeah, but not so great on the oral, but I always am more of a fan of the oral presentation. So it's like, teach me how to speak like that, man. I just want to figure out where you go to learn like to speak like that when the thing is, but man.
Uh,
And how you remain so calm and even as you're getting beat around, and you have this one. He has this wonderful way of parrying these questions and giving answers that don't seem disrespectful at all, which is so admirable. He's able to. It's he's giving answers that answer the question in a way that advocates for his side without seeming disrespectful to them and even challenging. He answers in a way that doesn't even seem like he's challenging them. It's just like this matter of fact, dry, calm thing that's like, you've completely answered my question in a way that doesn't like try to make me look like a fool
but that's
while
experience.
disagreeing with me. It's like,
That's
wow.
experience, baby. That's experience. He's just been in the fire before. He's just been in the
I
fire.
guess.
And he needs to stop being acting. They need to just appoint him and say, this is your job. You do this for a living, brother. So.
All right. Well, I don't really have anything more to talk about, so I think we'll end the stream here.
Yeah, no, but listen, thanks again. Again, don't forget, everybody, we do this every Thursday. Next week is going to be on my channel. We're going to be talking about hot topics. So at the end of the day, it's interesting. At the end of the day, I don't really think anything's really changed with was it Carmela? Was it Carmela, right? Or Kamala? Kamala.
One of those things.
What's his name just got upset with what's his name Tucker
Tucker Carlson.
Kamala Harris. But again, don't get me wrong, it'll be great. She becomes vice president, first woman vice president, number 2. But I think at the end of the day, this really doesn't change anything. This doesn't change the dynamics of the race because you really still got the same thing, and you vote for the top 2. So we'll see what happens.
All right. Well, as always, I'll thank my guest, Nate the Lure, and I am going to sign off. If you haven't already done so, please go visit Nate's channel, subscribe over there, and please like and subscribe this channel. As always, we appreciate
100,000. You're going to the next part is going to be 100,000. You're on this side. 100,000.
I hope so, man. I hope so. All right. Peace, guys.
Peace.